In a single moment, kindness can change an entire destiny. Bader, a poor black waitress in Atlanta, had no idea that rushing into the rain to save a blind boy would lead her to an entirely new life. But why did a wealthy white CEO seek her out just days later? And what did he do to make her dream come true while confronting deep-seated prejudice? Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and step into this story. This Atlanta, the city of oak-lined streets and soul rhythms pulsed with life on a muggy summer evening. On Peachtree Street, Miss Ella's soul food diner bustled with patrons. The sound of a saxophone crackled from an old radio, blending with the smell of fried cornbread and crispy chicken, creating a warm, homey atmosphere in the city's heart. Waitstaff moved swiftly between tables among them, Bader calling customers honey with that familiar southern charm. But behind Bader's smile was a heart weighed down by worry. Bader, 28, was an African-American woman with bright eyes and neatly braided hair. She had grown up in the Bankhead Projects, a place where dreams were often crushed by poverty. When she was little, her mother Ruth had fallen seriously ill with no money for medicine. A stranger, a white nurse, had paid for her hospital bills without asking for anything in return. "Kindness is a gift you don't need to repay," the nurse had said. That phrase etched itself into Bader's mind, becoming the compass of her life. Now she worked at Miss Ella's, saving every penny to send home to her mother, who was still battling heart disease in Savannah. Tonight, Bader felt more exhausted than usual. Her phone buzzed with a message from her landlord. "Rent due by Friday, or you're out." She looked down at the food tray in her hands, trying to hold back tears. "Just get through this shift, Bader," she whispered. A customer called from the corner booth. "Hey girl, where's my wings?" "Right here, honey," Bader replied, still sweet-voiced. But inside, she counted every dollar, wondering how to pay for her mom's medicine and her run-down apartment. A few blocks away, inside a sleek midtown tower, David Harper sat alone in his office. He was the CEO of Harper Home Tech, America's leading home appliance company, producing everything from smart dishwashers to automated ovens. At 45, David had money, power, and a lakefront mansion on Lake Lanier. But what he lacked was joy. 7 years earlier, his wife Emily had died, giving birth to their only son Daniel. Since then, David had become a cold man, hidden behind work and solitude. He stared at a photo on his desk, Emily's radiant smile. 7 years, Em, he murmured. "I still don't know how to live." Daniel, now 7, had been born blind. David loved his son, but didn't know how to show it. He bought Daniel expensive clothes, hired the best tutors, and installed a smart home system to help him move around more easily. But he rarely spent time with him. Whenever he looked into Daniel's cloudy eyes, he saw Emily, and the pain made him turn away. Today felt different. That morning, standing outside Daniel's room, David had overheard his son whisper to his mother's photo, "Mom, Dad loves me, but I wish he'd say it, just once." The words cut like a blade. David turned away, unable to step inside. In the car on the way to work, he promised himself, "I have to change for Daniel." He decided that tonight, he'd take his son out for dinner, just the two, and start over. Daniel sat alone on a wooden bench outside at Miss Ella's, gripping his white cane. David had brought him there, promising dinner together, but an urgent message from his assistant shattered the moment. Zoom call with the Japanese investors just started. David paused at the restaurant door, glancing around. "Daniel," he said quickly, "I must take this call. Just a minute. Sit here, okay?" Daniel nodded, his small hand holding his father's. "You'll come back soon, right?" "Promise," David said, guiding him to the bench before hurrying back to the car. Daniel sat still, tuning into the sounds around him. laughter from inside the restaurant cars, passing on Peachtree and Aretha Franklin's deep voice, echoing from a nearby radio. He wore a wool coat, but it wasn't enough when the wind picked up. Then the rain came light at first, then harder. Daniel clutched his coat tighter, hands trembling as he hugged his cane. He lifted his face, though he couldn't see, feeling the cold rain on his cheeks. "Dad," he whispered. No reply. Bader had just set down a plate of fried chicken when she looked out the window. A boy, no more than 10, was curled up in the rain, clutching a white cane. Her heart clenched. "Oh my God, why is that boy out there?" She turned to Tanya, her co-worker at the counter. "Tanya, do you know that kid?" Tanya shrugged. "Came with some man in a suit. He went back to the car. Must be his dad." Bader frowned. "And just left him soaking like that?" Tanya nodded. "Looks like it." Bader put down her tray and wiped her hands on her apron. She looked outside again. The boy still sat there, head down, coat soaked through. A mother and daughter passed by. The girl pointed. "Mommy, he's all wet." The mother tugged her away. "Don't look, sweetheart." Bader couldn't take it anymore. She pushed the door open and ran outside, rain pelting her face. "Hey, sweetheart," she called softly. "Are you okay?" Daniel turned his head, his clouded eyes facing the sound. "I'm okay," he said, voice barely audible. Bader knelt, seeing his cheeks wet, not just from rain, but from tears. "No, you're not," she said, taking his hand. "Come inside where it's warm." Daniel hesitated. "Dad told me to wait here." Bader pressed her lips. "He'll find you, but you'll get sick if you stay out here. Come on." She gently helped him up and led him inside. The scent of food and soul music wrapped around Daniel like a blanket. Bader guided him to a corner booth, grabbed a towel, and wiped his face and hands. "What's your name?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Daniel," he replied. "I'm Bader. Nice to meet you." She smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "You're shivering. Let me get you something warm, okay?" Daniel shook his head. "Dad doesn't like me being a bother." Bader paused, her heart aching. "You're not bothering anyone. Just a little food, all right?" Daniel nodded slowly. Bader rushed to the kitchen and grabbed the last plate of chicken fried rice reserved for a customer. She didn't care. She brought it out, sat beside Daniel, and fed him spoon by spoon. "Tastes good?" she asked. Daniel chewed slowly, then nodded. "It's excellent, ma'am." A small smile spread across his face the first of the night. "Thank you," he said. "You're kind." Bader smiled back, but her heart was heavy. Why was a child like Daniel left in the rain? Where was his father? She glanced out the window and saw a black Mercedes parked nearby. Inside, David sat wearing headphones, eyes fixed on his laptop screen. He didn't see the rain. He didn't see his son was no longer on the bench. David was arguing with an investor about a multi-million-dollar deal when a crack of thunder jolted him. He looked up. The bench was empty. "Daniel!" His heart raced. He flung the door open, rain soaking his suit. He rushed to the bench, hands shaking. Then he looked at the restaurant. Through the window, he saw Daniel sitting in the corner, happily eating. A black woman, hair braided, apron on, was wiping his hands with care in her eyes. David stood still, rain running down his face. He didn't blink. That woman, Bader, was doing something he never had, being there for Daniel. She said something. Daniel laughed, a sound David hadn't heard in a long time. His chest ached, not from anger, but realization. He had neglected his son. David walked into the diner. The warmth hit him instantly. Daniel looked up. "Dad." David knelt, holding his son's hands. "I'm sorry," he said, voice trembling. "I shouldn't have left you." Daniel nodded, gripping his father's hand. It's okay, Dad. David looked up at Bader, who stood silently nearby. Thank you, he said, for taking care of my son. Bader shook her head. It's just what anyone should do. David looked deep into her eyes. No, not everyone would. He stood up. What's your name? Bader, she answered. He nodded. Thank you, Bader. I won't forget this. David held Daniel's hand and led him to the car. As they left, he looked back and saw Bader returning to work, still smiling at customers, but her smile couldn't hide the exhaustion. He felt something in her, a genuine kindness he thought the world had lost. In the car, David sat in silence, heart heavy. He knew he had to do something for this woman and his son. Bader stood behind the counter at Miss Ella's Soul Food, wiping down a plastic tray, but her mind lingered on the blind boy who had just left. Daniel's slight smile, the way he clutched his white cane, and his shy thank you warmed her heart. But as the neon lights of the diner flickered, reality pulled her back, rent her sick mother, and a shift that wouldn't end until midnight. She didn't know that David Harper was planning to change her life, and his own, in the black Mercedes that had just driven away from Peachtree Street. But would Bader's kindness be enough to overcome the prejudices awaiting her in a world not everyone welcomed her into? The rain had stopped, leaving shimmering puddles on Atlanta's sidewalks. Bader returned to work bringing a plate of fried cornbread for a group of laughing customers. The radio played Aretha Franklin's Respect, and an elderly woman in the corner booth sang along, her deep voice full of emotion. Sweetheart, more soda. A customer called out. Coming right up, honey, Bader replied, her smile radiant despite her aching feet. Yet every time she passed the window, she glanced at the wooden bench, as if Daniel were still sitting there soaked and alone. Inside the car, David drove slowly through the illuminated streets, Daniel seated beside him, holding his cane. The boy was silent, but a small smile remained on his lips. Dad, Daniel said hesitantly. Miss Bader was nice. She gave me fried rice and talked to me. David glanced at his son, his heart aching. She did, he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. What did she say? She asked what I liked if I feared the rain. She didn't treat me like a kid. David gripped the steering wheel tightly. He had left his son in the rain, while a stranger, a waitress with a grease-stained apron, had made Daniel feel cared for. She's special, David murmured almost to himself. Daniel nodded. I want to see her again. David didn't respond, but an idea sparked in his mind. He needed to do something not just for Daniel, but for the woman who had made him reflect on himself. They arrived at the Buckhead mansion, where magnolia trees scented the night air. David helped Daniel to his room, settling him onto the bed. Good night, son, he said, his voice gentler than it had been in months. Good night, Dad, Daniel replied with a smile. David closed the door, but instead of heading to his office as usual, he sat on the sofa and picked up his phone. He called his driver Marcus, a middle-aged black man who had worked for him for 10 years. Marcus, David said when the call connected, I need you to do something. There's a waitress named Bader at Miss Ella's Soul Food. Find out about her, where she lives, what she does, her circumstances, but discreetly don't let her know. Marcus hesitated. Did she do something wrong, sir? No, David replied quickly. She did something right. Very right. I want to help her. Marcus agreed, and David ended the call. He looked out the window, where the moonlight shimmered on Lake Lanier. He felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in 7 years. Across Atlanta, Bader pushed open the door to her small apartment in Vine City. The room contained only a broken-legged bed, an old wooden table, and a flickering light bulb. She removed her shoes, sat on the bed, and hugged her knees. The landlord's message echoed in her mind. Friday or you're out." She opened her wallet, counting a few coins, not enough for milk, let alone rent. Her mother Ruth needed heart medication, but the hospital in Savannah had just sent another bill. Bader closed her eyes, trying not to cry. She was used to hardship, but tonight it felt heavier. Then she remembered Daniel, the blind boy, with cloudy eyes smiling as he took his first bite of fried rice. "Thank you. You're very kind," he had said. Bader smiled, tears streaming down her face. "At least I did something," she whispered. She lay down staring at the stained ceiling. Kindness didn't pay the rent, but it offered a bit of solace. She closed her eyes, praying for a miracle, even if she didn't dare believe in one. The next morning, Bader woke early, donned her Miss Ella's uniform, and caught the bus to the diner. She passed a street band playing saxophone, on the way the blues melody blending with the honking cars. Atlanta was waking up with vendors selling bread on street corners and young girls braiding hair on the sidewalks. She stopped to buy a small loaf of bread from a familiar older woman paying with her last coins. "Keep going, girl," the woman said. Bader nodded, her heart warmed. At the diner, Tanya greeted her with a hug. "You were bold yesterday bringing that kid in." Tanya laughed. "If the boss finds out you gave away free food, you're in trouble." Bader shrugged. He was worth it. She tied on her apron and began her shift. But today, she noticed a black man in a polo shirt sitting at a corner table watching her from afar. It was Marcus, David's driver, observing discreetly. He asked Tanya several questions about Bader, pretending to be a regular customer. Bader, "Best of us," Tanya said. "Works like a mule, sends money to her sick mom. But she's struggling. Her landlord's about to kick her out." Marcus took note and left the diner without further comment. He called David to report. "Her name is Bader Johnson, and she has a cheap Vine City apartment. She works as a waitress with no degree, but everyone likes her. Her mom's sick, and she's behind on rent. She's having a tough time, sir." David listened, gripping the phone tightly. "Thank you, Marcus. I know what to do." 3 days later, as Bader was wiping down tables at the end of her shift, the door to Miss Ella's opened. David walked in, still in his dark blue suit. But he wasn't in a hurry this time. Bader was taken aback. "You're Daniel's father." David smiled, a rare expression. "Yes. May I speak with you for a moment?" Bader glanced at Tanya, who raised an inquisitive eyebrow. She nodded and led David to a corner of the diner. David sat down, placing a brown envelope on the table. "Bader," he said in a deep voice, "I saw how you treated Daniel. You didn't just help him. You made him feel cared for. That's rare." Bader shook her head. "I just did the right thing, sir. The boy was cold and hungry." David looked her in the eyes. "Not everyone stops for a stranger's child. You're special." He pushed the envelope toward her. "Open it." Bader, hands trembling, opened the envelope and took out a letter. She skimmed it, eyes widening. "A job. At your company." David nodded. "Community Relations Manager at Harper Home Tech. Good salary, company provided housing. You won't have to worry about rent anymore." Bader shook her head, confused. "But I don't have a degree." "I'm just a waitress." David leaned in. "You have something more important: kindness and empathy. My company needs someone like you, someone who listens and who cares. You can do this." Bader looked at the letter, her hands shaking. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice choked. David paused, searching for words. "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that kindness can change everything. And because Daniel needs people like you." Bader bowed her head, tears falling. She thought of her mother, the dilapidated apartment, the sleepless nights. I need time to think," she said. David nodded. "Of course. Marcus, my driver, will contact you tomorrow." He stood shaking her hand. "Thank you again." As he left, Bader sat down clutching the letter. She saw a glimmer of light in the darkness. For the first time, Bader stood before Harper Hometech's Midtown Tower on Monday, her heart pounding. She wore the only business dress she owned, which she had borrowed from Tanya, and her old shoes had been polished. The building gleamed with people in suits, hurrying by, phones in hand. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. A white receptionist with blonde Bader stood at the window of her small office at Harper Hometech, looking down at the traffic on Peachtree Street, her heart racing. A few weeks ago, she was a waitress at Miss Ella's Soul Food, struggling with rent and worrying for her mother. Now she had a dream job, a new home, and the trust of David Harper, a powerful CEO. But the doubtful glances from coworkers and the threats from Thompson, a manager with racial prejudice, reminded her that this journey would be far from easy. Would Bader's kindness and resilience be enough to overcome the wall of prejudice rising around her? And when a scheme threatens to destroy everything, what will she do to protect herself? Bader sat at her desk and opened her laptop, the glow from the screen lighting her face. The office was small but bright with a green potted plant David had given her on her first day. "To help you feel comfortable," he'd said with a rare smile. Bader smiled at the memory, but it faded quickly as she heard whispering from the hallway. What's she doing here? Word is David pulled her out of some cheap diner, probably just for show. She took a deep breath and told herself, I belong here. David had assigned her to community relations, a role that required listening to employees and helping build a better work environment. But she felt the weight of judgment every step she took in the Midtown Tower. The sharply dressed employees, mostly white, looked at her like she didn't belong. Some were polite, but others whispered behind her back, especially Thompson, a senior manager with eyes cold as steel. Thompson, 50, a veteran in the field, had once hoped to join Harper Hometech's board of directors. When David passed him over for an outsider, he was bitter. But when Bader appeared, a black woman with no degree from Vine City, his jealousy turned into hatred. She's not qualified, he told a coworker in the break room. David's blinded by some feel-good story. She'll ruin the company. The coworker nodded weakly, not daring to speak up. Thompson smirked. He already had a plan. Bader had no idea a scheme was forming. She focused on her work, reading employee emails and taking notes on complaints about hours and benefits. She remembered David's words, listen, care, just like you did with Daniel. Each night, she took files home to her new apartment, a clean space in Midtown, provided by the company. She sat by the window, listening to blues on the radio, writing plans to improve the workplace. The sounds of B.B. King and the smell of her coffee brought her back to Atlanta, the city of spirit and struggle. One afternoon, David knocked on her office door. Bader, got a minute? He asked, holding 2 coffee cups. She was surprised, but nodded. They sat down, and he handed her a cup. I've heard you're doing well, he said. Employees are starting to talk about you in a good way. Bader smiled but hesitated. Not everyone feels that way, sir. Some don't want me here. David frowned. Who? She shook her head. Just a feeling. I'm used to it. He looked at her, his expression softening. Bader, I know this place isn't easy, but you have talent. You made Daniel laugh, something I couldn't do for 7 years. If you could do that, you can change this company. Bader lowered her eyes and moved. Thank you, but sometimes I'm afraid I'm not strong enough. David leaned forward. You're stronger than you think, and I'm here if you need me. The conversation stretched on, turning personal. Bader spoke of her mother, Ruth, a gospel singer in a Savannah church, who taught her that kindness is a flame that never goes out. David shared about Emily, his late wife, a woman who loved Langston Hughes, and believed in justice. "She'd like you," David said quietly. Bader smiled. "I hope so." At that moment, a quiet connection formed between two cooling cups of coffee. A week later, David invited Bader to present at a board meeting. "I want you to pitch your ideas on employee benefits," he said. Bader was nervous, but agreed. In the meeting room, she stood before 10 faces, mostly middle-aged white men. Thompson sat in the corner, eyes like knives. David nodded in encouragement, and Bader began. "I don't have a degree like everyone here," she said clearly, "but I know what employees need. They want to be heard, respected. If we improve benefits like paid leave and mental health support, they'll be more committed." She presented survey data she'd prepared late into the night. The room was silent. Then one board member nodded. "Good ideas," he said. Another agreed. David smiled pride in his eyes. But then Thompson stood. His voice was cold. "Nice ideas, but unrealistic. Ms. Johnson, you're new here. You don't understand how things work. This isn't a diner where you can do whatever you want." A few snickers followed. Bader flushed, but remained calm. "I don't know everything, Mr. Thompson, but unhappy employees weaken a company. I'm here to help, not to hurt." Thompson sneered but didn't reply. David stepped in. "Thank you, Bader. We'll review your proposal." After the meeting, Bader returned to her office, hands shaking. She had stood up to Thompson, but his words and the laughter cut like blades. She called Tanya, voice choked. "Tanya, I don't know if I can do this. They look at me like I don't belong." Tanya sighed. "You're Bader Johnson, the woman who ran into the rain to save a child. You belong wherever you choose. Don't let those men break you." Bader smiled, regaining her strength. She opened her laptop, determined to prove her worth. But Thompson wasn't done. In the break room, he whispered to a group of staff, "She's only here because David fell for a sob story. She's going to drag this company down. People like her don't understand business." A young employee, Sarah, objected. "She has good ideas. Why are you targeting her?" Thompson sneered. "Because I know what she is, a girl from the projects pretending to be smart." Sarah walked away, but Thompson's words spread, planting seeds of doubt. On a quiet Friday night, the office was nearly empty. Bader stayed late to finish a report. She was tired, but proud her mother had just called to say, "You make me proud, Bader." She smiled, closed her laptop, ready to leave. Then Thompson appeared with a fake smile. "Bader, may I borrow your computer for a minute? Mine's down. I need to check an urgent email." Bader hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Mr. Thompson." She stepped away to lock the window, her usual routine. Thompson sat down and inserted a USB drive. His fingers flew over the keyboard, sending an email from Bader's account to a list of clients containing Harper Home Tech's confidential financial data. He removed the USB and stood. "All set. Thanks." Bader nodded, unaware. Thompson left with a smug smile. He knew that email would ruin her. On Monday, Bader entered the office to find David waiting, face stern. "Bader, into my office," he said. She followed, heart pounding. David slid a folder across the desk. "This email was sent from your computer Friday night. It contains sensitive financial data. Clients received it. The board is furious." Bader read the document, eyes wide. "This is my email, but I didn't send it. I don't even know what this data is." David looked at her thoughtfully. "I believe you, but the board won't be easily convinced. The email came from your machine, and Thompson demands your dismissal." Bader sat down, hands cold. "Thompson." She recalled Friday night, his eyes. "He used my computer. He did it on purpose." David nodded. "Maybe. We need proof. Are you ready to fight?" Bader took a deep breath and nodded. "I won't let anyone destroy me." David and Bader stayed late digging through computer logs. Between lines of code, they found that Thompson had logged into Bader's computer when the email was sent. "We got him," David said, eyes blazing. Bader nodded, but her heart felt heavy. She knew this wasn't just a personal attack. Thompson represented the prejudice she had faced her whole life. The sneers at stores, the whispers on buses, the doors slammed shut because of her skin. The board called an emergency meeting. Bader entered holding a folder and facing stern faces. Thompson sat smugly as if he'd already won. A board member spoke. "Ms. Johnson, the email from your machine caused serious harm. How do you explain it?" Bader stood tall, her voice calm. "I didn't send that email, and I have proof." She presented the login records pointing to when Thompson had used her computer. Thompson laughed loudly. "You're accusing me? You with no degree dare accuse me?" Bader met his eyes. "I don't need a degree to know the truth. You used my machine. You sent that email. Not because I'm unqualified, but because of who I am, a black woman from Vine City." The room fell silent. She continued. "I came here to work, to help this company. But I won't stay silent when I'm falsely accused." David stood and presented a printed log. "Bader is right. Thompson, you tried to sabotage her." The room stirred. A board member shook his head. "Thompson, you've disappointed us." Thompson stammered, but no one defended him. David's voice was cold. "You're fired. Leave now." A security guard escorted Thompson out. Bader exhaled, eyes glistening with tears. After the meeting, David handed her a glass of water. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. Bader smiled, her voice trembling. "Thank you for believing me." David nodded. "I don't just believe in you. I'm proud of you." They stood together in the shining hallway, feeling a deeper connection. But Bader knew her battle wasn't over. Prejudice still lingered, and she would have to keep proving herself. Bader stood in her small office at Harper Home Tech, holding a thank you card from the team, whose benefits she had helped improve. Just a few months ago, she was a waitress at Miss Ella's Soul Food, running into the rain to save a blind boy named Daniel. Now she was an indispensable part of the company, respected by colleagues, after overcoming the schemes of Thompson, a man poisoned by racial bias. But what warmed her heart most wasn't the job. It was Daniel's smile and the transformation she saw in David, a once cold man who had become her anchor. Would Bader's journey end in a real family? And what mark would her kindness leave on a world full of prejudice? Atlanta. In autumn, the oaks along Peachtree Street glowed golden. Bader stepped out of the Midtown Tower, holding a coffee from Sweet Auburn, where the scent of peach cobbler blended with the laughter of older women selling their wares. She wore a deep blue office dress, her braids neatly tied, no longer a server in a grease-stained apron. Her new apartment in Midtown, with windows overlooking Piedmont Park, was a gift from David. Not just a place to stay, but a symbol of a new beginning. Bader's work at Harper Home Tech grew stronger each day. After the incident with Thompson, the board approved her proposals, paid leave, mental health support, and regular employee check-ins. These changes eased tension in the workplace, and Bader received handshakes from people who had once doubted her. Sarah, a young employee, even brought homemade cookies to her office. "You've changed this place, Bader," Sarah said. Bader smiled. "No, we changed it together." But prejudice hadn't vanished entirely. Some colleagues kept their distance, and rumors about the girl from the projects lingered in break rooms. Bader paid it no mind. Every evening she called her mother Ruth, telling her about work and Atlanta. "You make me proud," Ruth said, her voice frail but warm. "But never lose your kindness, Bader. That's your strength." Bader nodded into the phone, remembering the nurse who saved her mother. Kindness, she knew, was a flame that never dies. David also noticed the change, not just in the company, but in himself. He started spending time with Daniel, taking him to the park, and reading books aloud in a warm voice. But what surprised him most was how Bader quietly became part of their lives. One afternoon, he invited her to his Buckhead estate to thank her. "Bader, you haven't just helped this company," he said, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunlight shimmer on Lake Lanier. "You've helped me become a better father." Bader smiled, sipping her peach tea, Georgia's signature drink. "I just did what was right, Mr. Harper. Daniel needed his dad and you showed up." David looked at her, eyes gentle. "Call me David. And know you did more than that. You gave Daniel and me hope." They talked about little things, the gospel music Bader's mother loved, the poetry Emily used to read, and Daniel's dream of owning a piano. Their conversation flowed until the sun went down, and Bader felt a deep connection, not just with David, but with the home itself. Now, familiar with Bader's voice, Daniel lit up whenever she visited. One Saturday evening, she brought a gospel CD by Mahalia Jackson, Ruth's favorite. "Daniel, this is soul music," she said, playing the disc in the living room. Daniel sat in a chair, tapping to Amazing Grace. "Miss Bader, can you teach me to play piano?" he asked, eyes bright despite his blindness. Bader laughed. "I'm no good at piano, but I'll learn with you." She led him to the piano in the corner and placed his hands on the keys. Together they pressed the first notes, their laughter echoing through the house. David stood in the doorway, silently watching. Bader patiently guiding Daniel, telling stories about Harriet Tubman. The black woman who led enslaved people to freedom stirred something in him. This wasn't just kindness. This was family. Bader visited David's home more often, not just to see Daniel, but to cook, talk, and share. One evening, she made cornbread fritters using her mother's recipe. The smell filled the kitchen. Daniel inhaled deeply and laughed. "Miss Bader, that's better than Miss Ella's." David, trying to help, for the first time burned a batch, making all three burst into laughter, tears in their eyes. Those moments among sizzling pans and soul music drew them closer. David realized he didn't just admire Bader, he was falling in love. Not because of her kindness, but because she gave meaning to everything. But he hesitated. Daniel came first, and he didn't want to hurt him. One night after Daniel had gone to bed, David sat with Bader on the sofa, soft lighting, casting shadows across the room. "Bader," he said gently, "what do you think about family?" She looked at him surprised. "Family is where you belong, even if the world turns its back on you." "Why do you ask?" David took her hand for the first time. "Because you've made this house a home. I want to ask you something, but I need to talk to Daniel first." Bader smiled, heart racing. "I understand. Daniel is the most important." They sat there hand in hand, no more words needed. Outside, Atlanta's lights still shimmered, but something inside this house had changed forever. A few days later, David sat with Daniel on the porch, the autumn breeze crisp. "Son," he said, "how do you feel when Miss Bader is around?" Daniel tilted his head, smiling. "Happy, Dad. She makes everything brighter. She tells stories, teaches me piano, and doesn't treat me like a kid." David smiled, warmth in his chest. "You like her?" Daniel nodded eagerly. "I love her. She makes our home warm." David took a deep breath. "What if I asked Miss Bader to be part of our family like your mom? What would you think?" Daniel sat up, eyes wide. "Really? She could be my mom?" David nodded, though his son couldn't see. "I want to ask her, but only if you say yes." Daniel threw his arms around him. "Yes, Dad. Please let her be my mom." David hugged his son, eyes stinging. For the first time in 7 years, his heart felt whole. He planned the proposal carefully. He wanted it to be special. He chose Sweet Auburn Bader's favorite cafe, with walls covered in civil rights murals and the smell of fresh peach cobbler. On a Friday evening, he invited her there, saying they were celebrating a company milestone. Their table was decorated with magnolias. A saxophonist played My Funny Valentine in the corner. Surprised, Bader entered wearing the red dress she bought with her first paycheck. "David, what is all this?" They dined laughing about Daniel, the company, and the rainy days at Miss Ella's. After dessert, peach cobbler with vanilla ice cream, David took her hand. "Bader, you changed my life and Daniel's. You're not just the woman who saved a boy in the rain. You're our light." He knelt, pulling out a simple silver ring she liked. "Bader Johnson, will you marry me and make our family whole?" Bader covered her mouth, tears streaming. The cafe applauded, but she saw only David. "David, this is a lot. I need time." He nodded, standing. "I'll wait as long as you need." Bader came to the estate a week later, holding Daniel's hand. She looked at David and smiled. "Yes, David, I'll marry you." Daniel squealed and hugged her. "Mom, Bader." Laughter filled the house, echoing into the Atlanta night. Months later, Bader stood at a company event, now David's fiancée, and a respected leader at Harper Home Tech. She wore a dress inspired by African kente cloth, honoring her heritage. Employees applauded as she spoke. "I was just a waitress. But one act of kindness, helping a boy in the rain, changed my life." Don't let prejudice stop you from doing good. Someone is always watching, and that someone might be your future. The crowd cheered. David, holding Daniel's hand, beamed with pride. Bader had not only won their hearts, she reshaped the company. She sent money home to her mother, who recovered enough to visit Atlanta singing gospel at their engagement party. Daniel learned piano playing Amazing Grace for Bader, his mom. Buckhead's once cold house was full of music, laughter, and love. This story reminds us that kindness can break through even the deepest walls of prejudice. Bader, a black woman from Vine City, faced doubt and hatred, but rose above it with courage and heart. Never stop doing good, no matter who you are, because kindness always finds its way back. Bader stood on the stage of a grand hall in Atlanta, lights illuminating her vibrant kente dress, symbolizing African American heritage. Before her were hundreds of Harper Home Tech employees, once skeptical of her, now applauding thunderously. Just a year prior, she was a waitress at Miss Ella's Soul Food, running into the rain to save the blind boy Daniel. That act of kindness led her to a dream job, a family with David and Daniel, and a battle against prejudice she had won. But when a new challenge arises, threatening to shake what she has built, what will Bader do to protect the legacy of kindness? And how will her story inspire Atlanta and beyond? Atlanta in late autumn. Streets covered in golden leaves and the crisp air of November. Bader woke up in the warm room of the Buckhead mansion where she and David now called home. Beside her, David still slept, breathing steadily, his face more relaxed than ever. She smiled, recalling the moment he proposed at Sweet Auburn with magnolia flowers and the sound of saxophone. Daniel, the blind boy, she now called son, was sleeping in the next room, his piano placed by the window. Bader went to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and made fried corn cakes using her mother Ruth's recipe. The aroma spread, drawing Daniel out of his room. "Mom, Bader," he called, his voice bright, his white cane tapping the wooden floor. She knelt, hugging him. "Good morning, my angel. Ready for your piano lesson?" Daniel nodded, eyes bright, despite not seeing. "I want to play Amazing Grace for Grandma." Ruth, now healthier, thanks to the money Bader sent, was on her way from Savannah to Atlanta to attend her engagement ceremony. Bader couldn't wait for her mother to see her new life, from a shabby apartment in Vine City to this laughter-filled home. David entered the kitchen and kissed her cheek. "What's that delightful smell?" he asked, smiling. "Mom's secret recipe." Beta replied, winking. They had breakfast together. Daniel talking about his dream of becoming a musician, and David promised to hire the best piano teacher. After breakfast, Bader took Daniel to Piedmont Park, where children played, and street artists painted civil rights movement murals. She pushed him on the swing, listening to him sing, "This Little Light of Mine," a song Ruth used to sing in church. "Mom, can I sing this at the engagement ceremony?" Daniel asked. Bader laughed heartily. "Of course, son. Everyone will love it." These moments, amidst the autumn sunshine and Daniel's laughter, made her feel her life was complete. At Harper Home Tech, Bader was now the Director of Community Relations, a role she turned into a force for change. She organized workshops on diversity and inclusion, inviting African American speakers like community activist John Lewis Jr. to inspire. Employees once skeptical of her now called her the fixer, the one who brought unity. But the shadow of prejudice still lingered. Some major clients, especially from conservative states, whispered that a black woman shouldn't lead Harper's community campaign. David dismissed those remarks, but Bader felt the pressure. One morning, David called Bader into his office, his face tense. "Bader, we have a problem," he emailed her. A major client, Baxter Industries from Texas, threatened to cancel a $1 million contract if Bader continued representing the company in the promotional campaign. They were blunt. David continued, his voice low. "They don't want someone like you." Bader read the email, her heart tightening. The words were cold. "We don't believe Ms. Johnson represents the values of Harper Home Tech." She sat down, gripping the chair. "They don't want me because I'm black," she said, her voice calm but sharp. David nodded, eyes filled with anger. "I plan to reject them. We don't need clients like that." But Bader shook her head. "David, this contract is important. It provides jobs for hundreds of employees. I won't let their prejudice harm the company." David looked at her, surprised. "Do you have a plan?" Bader smiled, though her heart was heavy. "I'll meet them. They'll have to face me first if they want me gone." David held her hand. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here." She nodded, feeling strength from his support. But inside she knew this was her battle, not just for the company, but for herself and those like her. She prepared meticulously, researching Baxter Industries, writing her speech, and practicing in front of the mirror. Daniel, sensing the tension, held her hand one evening. "Mom, I know you're strong," he said, "like Harriet Tubman you told me about." Bader hugged him, tears silently falling. "Thank you, Angel. I won't give up." The meeting with Baxter Industries occurred at a luxurious hotel in downtown Atlanta. Bader entered wearing an elegant black suit, her braided hair accented with golden strands, symbolizing pride. Baxter's representative, Mr. William Baxter, an older white man, looked at her with scrutiny. "Ms. Johnson," he said coldly, "we're concerned about Harper Home Tech's image. You don't fit." Bader stood tall, her voice clear. "Mr. Baxter, I'm not here to change your opinion of me, but I'm here to talk about values. Harper Home Tech succeeds because we listen to employees, customers, and the community. I've helped the company increase employee satisfaction by 20%, and my community campaign brought in 3 major contracts. If you reject me because of my skin color, you're not just losing a contract but the future." The conference room fell silent. Another representative, a young woman named Emily, nodded. "She's right. We need partners with vision." Baxter frowned but didn't argue. After an hour of discussion, he agreed to keep the contract so that Bader could continue to lead the campaign. As she left the room, David waited in the hallway, hugging her tightly. "You did it," he whispered. Bader smiled, tears glistening. "We did it." Bader and David's engagement ceremony took place at Piedmont Park, under ancient oak trees, with gospel music and the scent of peach cobbler. In a purple dress, Ruth sang, "How Great Thou Art," her voice echoing as in her youth. Daniel, in a small suit, played Amazing Grace on the piano, moving everyone to tears. Bader, wearing a kente dress, held David's hand, feeling the love from family and community. She stood up to speak, her voice choked with emotion. "A year ago, I was just a waitress running into the rain to help a boy. That act led me here to a family mission. But I've learned that kindness doesn't just change us, it changes the world. Don't let prejudice stop you from doing what's right. Let the flame of kindness burn forever." The crowd applauded and Daniel ran to hug her. "Mom, I'm proud of you." David kissed her forehead, whispering, "Me too." With its golden-leafed streets and saxophone melodies, Atlanta seemed brighter that night. Months later, Bader launched a community program at Harper Home Tech, mentoring young Black women from Vine City. She named it Ruth's Light, after her mother teaching them that kindness and courage can break any barrier. Daniel composed his first piano piece dedicated to Mom Bader. Now a vocal advocate for diversity, David spoke at national conferences, crediting Bader for his transformation. This story is a testament that kindness, no matter how small, can ignite a revolution. Bader's act of saving Daniel in the rain didn't just change her life. It reshaped a company, a family, and a city. Never stop shining your light.